The alarm screamed across Forward Operating Base Atlas. Enemy armor approaching from 3 directions. American tanks, disabled. Backup, hours away. In the chaos of preparation, no one noticed the quiet mechanic walking calmly toward the motor pool. They were about to discover why some heroes hide behind greasy coveralls. The pre-dawn silence of Forward Operating Base Atlas shattered at 0547 hours. The klaxon's wail cut through the Afghan morning like a blade, sending soldiers scrambling from their bunks in various states of dress and panic. Major Patricia Hawkins burst from the command tent, her boots barely laced, scanning the perimeter through binoculars that trembled slightly in her grip. "Contact bearing 270, crackled the radio from the observation post. Multiple tracked vehicles, estimate for 7 enemy tanks, T-90s and older T-72s, advancing in formation. Distance 8 clicks and closing. 8 kilometers. In tank terms, that was practically next door. Hawkins felt her stomach drop as she processed the numbers. 47 enemy tanks against her small forward operating base, nestled in a strategic valley that controlled access to 3 major supply routes. Intelligence had missed this completely. The enemy had somehow moved an entire armored battalion through the mountains without detection. "Get me armor status," she barked into her radio. The response that came back made her blood freeze. "Ma'am, all Abrams tanks are down for maintenance. Engine problems, transmission issues, and electrical failures. We've got nothing operational." Nothing operational. The words echoed in her mind like a death sentence. Without armor support, the base's 847 personnel would be sitting ducks when those T-90s crested the ridge. Small arms fire and anti-tank missiles could only do so much against a full armored assault in the maintenance bay, located in the forgotten corner of the base where few officers ever ventured. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez heard the alarm just like everyone else. Unlike the others, however, he didn't run. He didn't panic. He simply set down his coffee, wiped his hands on a rag that had seen too many years of service, and walked toward the line of disabled M1A2 Abrams tanks that had been his responsibility for the past 12 years. Marcus was 41 years old, with graying temples and hands permanently stained with motor oil despite countless washings. He'd been at Atlas longer than anyone except the base commander himself. Officers came and went on their 18-month rotations, eager to add combat experience to their records before moving on to cushier assignments. Enlisted men rotated through their deployments, counting days until they could return to families and civilian lives. But Marcus stayed because someone had to keep the machines running. Because in a place where young soldiers' lives depended on equipment functioning perfectly, someone with real expertise needed to be there when things went wrong. And things always went wrong. The first tank in the line, call sign Thunder 1, had been down for 3 weeks with what the manual called catastrophic transmission failure. The second, Thunder 2, had suffered what appeared to be irreparable electrical damage during a convoy operation. Thunder 3 through Thunder 6 all had various engine problems that the depot-level mechanics had declared beyond field repair capabilities. As Marcus approached the vehicles, he could hear the distant rumble of enemy engines growing stronger. The T-90s were still miles away, but the sound carried clearly in the thin mountain air. He estimated, based on the acoustic signature, that the enemy was moving at approximately 30 kilometers per hour across difficult terrain. That gave him maybe 15 minutes before they came into visual range of the base, 20 minutes before they'd be in effective firing range. 20 minutes to accomplish what his superiors had declared impossible. The thing about Marcus Rodriguez that no one at Forward Operating Base Atlas knew was that he hadn't always been a maintenance specialist. 12 years earlier, when he'd first requested transfer from his original military occupational specialty, he'd been Sergeant Rodriguez, Tank Commander, 3rd Armored Division. He'd seen action in the early years of the Afghanistan conflict, commanding his own Abrams through some of the heaviest fighting the war had produced. He'd been good at it. Very good. His crew had maintained a perfect operational record through 2 combat deployments. His tank had never been disabled by enemy action, never missed a mission due to mechanical failure, never failed to complete an assigned objective. His superiors had recommended him for advancement, for specialized training. 4 positions that would have fast-tracked his career toward leadership roles. Instead, he'd requested transfer to maintenance. The decision had puzzled everyone who knew him. Tank commanders, especially successful ones, didn't voluntarily become mechanics. It was seen as a step backward, a waste of talent and experience. Some whispered that he'd lost his nerve, that combat stress had finally caught up with him. Others suggested he'd been quietly disciplined for some undisclosed infraction. The truth was simpler and more complicated than any of those theories. Marcus had requested the transfer because he'd realized something that others in his position rarely understood. In modern warfare, the mechanic was often more important than the commander. Battles weren't won by the most aggressive tactics or the bravest soldiers. They were won by whoever could keep their equipment functioning longest under the worst possible conditions. During his last deployment as a tank commander, Marcus had watched too many good crews become casualties not because they'd been outfought, but because they'd been let down by their machines. Engines that quit at crucial moments. Transmissions that failed during tactical movements. Electrical systems that couldn't handle the heat and vibration of sustained operations. The depot mechanics back at the main bases were competent enough, but they worked in clean, well-equipped shops with adequate parts supplies and detailed technical manuals. They knew how to fix things according to official procedures, but they'd never had to jury-rig a solution with whatever materials happened to be available while under enemy fire. Field mechanics were different. The good ones developed an intuitive understanding of their machines that went beyond technical specifications. They learned to diagnose problems by sound, to improvise solutions using parts that were never designed to work together, to keep equipment running long after it should have failed. Marcus had spent 12 years becoming that kind of mechanic. He'd studied every technical manual, attended every advanced course the Army offered, and learned from older sergeants who'd kept Vietnam-era equipment running with little more than determination and creative cursing. More importantly, he developed the kind of relationship with machines that comes only from working with them every day under conditions that constantly tested their limits. Now, as he approached the line of disabled tanks, Marcus carried with him not just 12 years of maintenance expertise, but also the tactical knowledge of someone who'd commanded armor in combat. He understood not just how to fix these machines, but how they needed to perform once they were running. Thunder 1-inch was his first priority. The transmission problem was real, but Marcus had suspected for weeks that the official diagnosis was incomplete. The depot mechanics had declared it a catastrophic failure requiring complete replacement, but their analysis was based on symptoms rather than direct examination of the failed components. Marcus had the tank's engine compartment open in 90 seconds. The transmission housing showed obvious signs of fluid leakage, but the pattern of the staining told a different story than what appeared in the maintenance reports. This wasn't catastrophic mechanical failure, it was a severed hydraulic line that had been misdiagnosed. The line had been damaged, probably by debris during a recent convoy operation, causing the transmission to lose hydraulic pressure. Without proper pressure, the transmission couldn't shift gears correctly, creating the symptoms that the depot mechanics had interpreted as internal mechanical failure. The actual fix was relatively simple: replace the damaged hydraulic line and refill the system with fluid. Marcus had the necessary parts in his maintenance inventory. More importantly, he had the knowledge to install them properly without the lengthy testing procedures that depot maintenance typically required. In a perfect world, he would have followed all the official protocols, run all the specified tests, and ensured that every component met exact specifications before declaring the vehicle operational. This wasn't a perfect world. Enemy tanks were 7 minutes closer than they'd been when he'd started working. While he worked on Thunder 1, Marcus mentally cataloged the problems with the other vehicles. Thunder 2's electrical problems were more complex, involving damage to the fire control system that affected the tank's ability to aim and fire its main gun accurately. Under normal circumstances, that would require specialized electronic test equipment and replacement components that weren't available in the field. However, Marcus had learned over the years that many electrical failures were actually connection problems. Vibration, heat, and moisture could cause connectors to work loose or develop corrosion that interfered with proper electrical contact. A thorough cleaning and reseating of connections often resolved problems that appeared to require major component replacement. Thunder 3-inch through Thunder 6 All suffered from variations of the same basic problem, engine performance issues that the depot mechanics had attributed to worn internal components. Marcus suspected, based on his experience with similar symptoms, that most of these were actually fuel system problems. Bad fuel, clogged filters, or contaminated injection systems could cause engine problems that mimicked more serious mechanical failures. The sound of enemy engines was getting noticeably louder. Marcus estimated they were now within 6 kilometers of the base, close enough that their advanced reconnaissance elements would soon have visual contact. He needed to work faster. Thunder 1's hydraulic line replacement was complete. Marcus started the engine and ran it through a quick systems check. The transmission engaged properly, shifting smoothly through its ranges. The tank was operational. 1 down, 5 to go. Marcus moved to Thunder 2 and immediately began pulling electrical connectors. As he'd suspected, several showed signs of corrosion and loose connections. He cleaned each contact point carefully and applied a thin coating of dielectric grease before reassembling them. The process was methodical but quick, based on years of experience with similar problems. When he powered up Thunder 2's systems, the fire control computer initialized properly and all diagnostic lights showed green. The tank was operational. 2 down, 4 to go. The enemy armor was now close enough that Marcus could distinguish individual engine notes. T-90s had a distinctive sound, different from the older T-72s. Based on what he was hearing, the enemy formation included approximately 30 of the newer tanks and 17 of the older models. The T-90s were more dangerous, equipped with better armor protection and more advanced fire control systems. Marcus worked on Thunder 3's fuel system, replacing the primary fuel filter and cleaning the injection system with solvent. The engine immediately began running more smoothly. He performed similar maintenance on Thunder 4, Thunder 5, and Thunder 6, each time diagnosing and correcting problems that had been beyond the capabilities or experience of the depot-level mechanics. 22 minutes after the initial alarm, Marcus had 6 fully operational M1A2 Abrams tanks ready for combat. More importantly, he had 6 tanks that he knew, from personal experience, would perform reliably under the stress of actual battle conditions. As he finished his work, Marcus became aware that the maintenance bay had filled with people. Major Hawkins stood near the entrance, flanked by her senior staff officers and several junior enlisted soldiers who'd been drawn by curiosity about what was happening in the usually ignored corner of the base. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Major Hawkins said, her voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. "Are you telling me these tanks are operational?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, wiping his hands on his rag. "All 6 vehicles are mission-ready." But the depot mechanics said, "Ma'am, with respect, the depot mechanics were wrong." Marcus's voice was quiet but confident. These weren't catastrophic failures. They were maintenance issues that required field-expedient solutions rather than depot-level component replacement. Major Hawkins stared at the line of tanks, their engines running smoothly, their systems showing ready status on all diagnostic displays. "How long have you known you could fix these?" "I've suspected for several weeks that the official diagnoses were incomplete," Marcus answered honestly. "But confirming my suspicions required hands-on investigation that I didn't have authorization to perform." The implication hung in the air between them. Marcus had known he could probably repair the tanks, but military protocol had prevented him from attempting the repairs without proper authorization. Authorization that would have required weeks of paperwork and approvals that would never have been granted for repairs that weren't officially possible. "Sergeant," Major Hawkins said slowly, "do we have crews for these tanks?" This was the question Marcus had been dreading. The base's tank crews had been reassigned to other duties when their vehicles had been declared non-operational. Some had been sent on leave, others had been assigned to infantry patrols or base security duties. Assembling complete, trained crews for 6 tanks on 15 minutes notice was impossible. "Ma'am, I can operate one of these vehicles myself," Marcus offered. "I was a tank commander before I transferred to maintenance." Major Hawkins looked at him with new interest. "You were a tank commander?" "Yes, ma'am." "Sergeant Rodriguez, 3rd Armored Division, 2 combat deployments. Why didn't this information appear in your personnel file?" It did them. But tank commanders who request transfer to maintenance aren't usually considered for combat assignments. The sound of enemy tanks was now clearly audible to everyone in the maintenance bay. Through the open doors, they could see dust clouds on the distant ridges marking the enemy formation's advance. Time was running out. Major Hawkins made a decision that would define her career and possibly determine the survival of everyone on the base. Sergeant Rodriguez, you're temporarily promoted to the rank of Staff Sergeant and assigned as acting commander of our armor section. Your mission is to engage enemy armor and deny them access to this base until reinforcements arrive. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied. I'll need volunteers for crew positions. Loaders, gunners, and drivers. Anyone with any armored vehicle experience. A young specialist stepped forward from the group of onlookers. Sergeant, I was a loader on an Abrams before I got reassigned to supply. I'll volunteer. Another voice spoke up, I can drive. Trained on M1A1s at Fort Knox. Within minutes, Marcus had assembled partial crews for 3 of the 6 tanks. It wasn't optimal. A proper tank crew required months of training to function effectively as a unit, but it was enough to get the vehicles into action. The other 3 tanks, Major Hawkins asked, can they be used? Yes, ma'am, but they'll need to be operated by individual crew members in defensive positions. We can use them as stationary gun platforms even without full crews. Marcus quickly explained his tactical plan. 3 tanks would advance to meet the enemy armor in mobile engagement, using their superior fire control systems and armor protection to engage targets at long range while maneuvering to avoid being outflanked. The other 3 would be positioned in hull-down defensive positions around the base, providing supporting fires and serving as a fallback position if the mobile tanks were forced to withdraw. It was a sound plan, but it depended entirely on the repaired tanks performing as Marcus believed they would. If his field-expedient repairs failed under combat stress, the entire defense would collapse as the hastily assembled crews prepared their vehicles. Marcus climbed into the commander's position of Thunder 1. The interior felt familiar despite the years since he'd last commanded armor in combat. The controls, the displays, the arrangement of equipment, it all came back to him with the muscle memory of extensive training and experience. Through his commander's periscope, Marcus could see the enemy formation clearly now. They were advancing in a classic armored assault formation, with T-90s forming the spearhead and older T-72s following in support. Their movement was disciplined and professional, indicating experienced crews and competent leadership. More troubling, the enemy appeared to have accurate intelligence about the base's defensive capabilities. Their approach route avoided the areas where American anti-tank missiles would be most effective, and their formation suggested they expected to encounter minimal armored resistance. They were about to be surprised. Marcus keyed his radio, establishing contact with his other tank commanders and with Major Hawkins in the base command post. Thunder Element, this is Thunder 1. Enemy armor now at 3 kilometers and closing. Request permission to engage. Thunder 1, you are cleared to engage. Good hunting, Sergeant. The battle for Forward Operating Base Atlas began at 0612 hours when Marcus Rodriguez, the mechanic everyone had ignored for 12 years, fired the first shot from a tank he'd repaired with his own hands 20 minutes earlier. His first round struck the lead T-90 center mass at 2,800 meters, penetrating its armor and causing a secondary explosion that indicated an ammunition cook-off. The enemy tank stopped advancing and began burning, its crew evacuating through emergency hatches. The enemy formation reacted immediately, spreading out to reduce their vulnerability and returning fire. Marcus's tank took 2 hits from T-72 main guns, but the Abrams' superior armor protection absorbed the impacts without penetrating damage. Thunder 2, target T-90 bearing 285, range 2,600, Marcus transmitted, coordinating his small force's fires to concentrate on the most dangerous enemy vehicles first. Thunder 2, shot out, came the reply, followed seconds later by Thunder 2, target destroyed. The battle continued for 47 minutes. Marcus's 3 mobile tanks maneuvered constantly, using the terrain to mask their movements while engaging enemy armor at ranges where their superior fire control systems provided significant advantages. The three stationary tanks provided supporting fires from defensive positions, forcing the enemy to divide their attention between multiple threat directions. When it ended, 31 enemy tanks had been destroyed or disabled, with the remainder withdrawing in disorder. American losses were limited to minor damage to 2 tanks, both of which remained operational. The arrival of Air Force close air support aircraft and Army reinforcements 30 minutes later found forward operating base Atlas secure and its defender calmly performing post-battle maintenance on his tanks. Major Hawkins found Marcus in the maintenance bay 2 hours later, back in his greasy coveralls, methodically inspecting each tank for battle damage and performing necessary repairs. The temporary rank insignia she'd given him earlier lay on his workbench, removed and set aside. "Sergeant," she began, then paused. "I need to understand something. You've been here for 12 years. You clearly have skills and experience that go far beyond what your personnel file indicates. Why have you been content to remain in maintenance?" Marcus looked up from the engine compartment he'd been inspecting. "Ma'am, with respect, I haven't been content. I've been necessary." "What do you mean?" "Everyone thinks the important jobs are the ones that get recognition," Marcus explained. "Tank commanders, infantry leaders, pilots, special operations. Those are the positions that get promoted, that get medals, that get remembered." He gestured toward the line of tanks, now bearing the scars of recent combat but still fully operational. "But none of that matters if the equipment doesn't work. You can have the best tactics, the bravest soldiers, the most advanced weapons in the world. If they fail when you need them most, none of the rest matters." Major Hawkins nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "For 12 years, I've made sure the equipment works," Marcus continued. "Not just according to technical manuals or depot-level procedures, but works when everything goes wrong, when there's no time for proper repairs, when lives depend on machines performing beyond their specifications. And today, that knowledge mattered more than rank or recognition or career advancement. Today, being the mechanic everyone ignored was exactly what this base needed." Major Hawkins looked at the tanks, then back at Marcus. "The after-action report I'm writing is going to recommend you for the Silver Star and for immediate promotion to Sergeant First Class. Your actions today saved this base and everyone on it." Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "Ma'am, I appreciate the recognition, but I'd prefer to remain in maintenance." "Why?" "Because tomorrow or next week or next month, these machines are going to break down again. And when they do, someone needs to be here who knows how to fix them. Someone who understands that keeping equipment operational isn't just a job. It's the difference between mission success and mission failure, between soldiers coming home and soldiers not coming home." 6 months later, when Marcus Rodriguez rotated back to the United States, he carried with him the Silver Star Major Hawkins had recommended, along with a promotion to Sergeant First Class and commendations from every officer who'd served at Forward Operating Base Atlas during his tenure. More importantly, he carried with him the knowledge that for 12 years, while others had pursued glory and advancement, he had quietly, competently, and necessarily done the job that made everything else possible. The young mechanics he trained at Atlas would carry on his work, maintaining the machines that kept soldiers alive in one of the world's most unforgiving environments. They would do so with the understanding that their work, while often invisible and rarely celebrated, was as crucial to mission success as any other military specialty. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought by generals or heroes. Sometimes they're fought by the people no one notices, the ones who keep the machines running and the mission moving forward, regardless of recognition or reward. Sometimes the mechanic everyone ignores is exactly the person everyone needs. Today, retired Master Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez runs a small auto repair shop in his hometown in Texas. The walls are decorated with certificates and commendations from his military service, but the centerpiece is a framed photograph. 6 M1A2 Abrams tanks in a maintenance bay, their crews standing proudly beside vehicles that shouldn't have been running but were. The young mechanics who work for him know he served in the military, but few know the details. Marcus doesn't talk much about his service, preferring to focus on the work at hand, keeping machines running when they're needed most. Occasionally, a customer will notice the military decorations and ask about his service. Marcus usually deflects such questions with a modest comment about doing his job and serving his country. But sometimes, when the question comes from a young person considering military service, he'll offer a different perspective. The military needs all kinds of people, he'll say, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that looks remarkably like the one he carried 12 years ago in Afghanistan. Leaders and followers, fighters and supporters, those who get the glory and those who make the glory possible. The important thing isn't what job you do, it's that you do it well enough to keep faith with the people who depend on you. It's a lesson that serves well in any profession, but one that Marcus learned in the place where such lessons matter most. In the space between operational and broken down, between success and failure, between coming home and not coming home.